Thank you. Thank you, Raina, Chap, Claire, Lyle. Thank you. Great hands-on resources, tips, tricks, laughs, nods, lots in the audience. So thank you. Our next panel is all about inclusive prosperity. So I'd like to welcome our moderator, Adrian Harrow, CEO of the Workers Lab, and our panelists.
Wow,
oh, and a
look at
big
that.
wow.
I'm going to set my coffee here. Is that okay? Hi, everybody. You guys can come with me too. Cool. And Shaylee, you're right there. Hi, how are you?
I am wonderful.
Okay. So good morning, everybody. My name is Adrian, and I'm the CEO of this wonderful organization called the Workers Lab. Before I get started, I want to say thank you to John Ziegler and Luisa Reyes, where I don't know where she is, but she's done a wonderful job. Yeah. And to Shoot Our Young for inviting me to participate. I'm really privileged to be here. I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about the Workers Lab and what we do, and then get to our wonderful panelists to talk about how they're building technology in ways that make the world more inclusive. So let me get started with the Workers Lab. The premise of our work at the Workers Lab is that virtually everything that is supposed to be for workers in this country, that's everything from laws and policies, programs and services, and yes, technology, virtually all of it, I believe, and we believe, my team is here in the back, is old and exclusive, and sometimes exclusive because it's old. And that really sucks, that the richest country in the world can't or doesn't know how to take care of every and all kind of worker in this country. So our purpose is to give new ideas for and with workers a chance to succeed. We do that primarily as an investor in a number of different new ideas for and with workers to demonstrate to people in power, both in the public and private sectors, that in fact there's another way, a better way to serve workers in this country. Doesn't matter if you're on a W-2, on a 1099, or whatever. And we've been proudly building technology with workers for the last 4 years, really since we started. We've given life to technology that made it possible to give emergency cash to gig workers. Last year, we built a tech solution with the tech company and with workers in Philadelphia that automates the way our government verifies income in the administration of public benefits. We are right now working with folks in Alameda County, which is near here, Santa Clara County, and all across the country on the most provocative, I think, piece of technology we've ever built with workers, which is to demonstrate to this country that it's possible to create a public option, government-run platform for good gig work, which, as you might imagine in this place, is pretty provocative, right? Next year, we're going to focus on portable benefits and really sort of scale a piece of technology that has brought AI to labor organizing into the labor movement. And so I say all of that to say that I think I'm in really good company, because I think we all believe, and Shaylee too, which at least in my world, which is closer to the progressive politics, labor movement, technology is often like really like we have an allergy to it. But technology is not the devil. At least that's not what we believe at the Workers Lab, right? The devil is
It's good news.
Good news.
Repeat that out, please.
We're talking about the devil today. No, I really mean that. The devil is actually in the choice that is made, right? And how technology is built and then used, right? And at the Workers Lab, we believe deeply that built the right way, designed the right way, technology can be used as a massive tool to include all the people who have been excluded from the policy gains or any other gains from the 20th century. Immigrants, queer people, women, people with disabilities, you name it. And I think we all agree that that's possible and should be the goal when we're creating technology. And I'm so happy to be here with people who agree with me on that point, and I'm going to introduce them to you now. Shaylee, I'm going to start with you, my dear, and I'm going to ask all of you, start with you and then ask all of you to do 3 things to tell us who you are, your affiliation, what you've built or are building in the way of technology, and why. Is that cool? I think she's on mute.
Damn it, classic problem. Really, really nice to meet all of you virtually. My name is Shelley Burnwell. I'm the founder, CEO of Elevate K-12. We are solving one of the biggest national crises plaguing the country right now, which is the teacher shortage. We all read and saw the news of math and reading and the scores falling last year, and we are at the forefront of solving that problem. The way we solve the problem is we are trying to completely change a very antiquated K-12 classroom system, where we are bringing access to quality teachers into the classrooms and removing the geographic arbitrage that exists between where the classrooms are and where the teachers are located. And in doing this, we landed up creating a massive category, and we're so excited to be at the forefront of solving this teacher shortage crisis, not just for today, but also for the future.
Thank you, Shaylee, and it's nice to meet you, my friend.
It's
Let's go to
very nice
Lexi.
to meet you too, Adrian.
Okay, Lexi, go ahead, and then we'll go to Matt.
All right. So first of all, thank you all for coming virtually or here. I just want to, I am a big believer of if you're on your laptop or your phone, then we're boring you. So just tell me, shout out what would make this panel worth 45 minutes of your time. What you guys came, so what, honestly, we'll adjust. What do you want to, methods and mindsets for inclusive prosperity. What did you want to hear? Karen, what did you want to hear? I'll repeat this for you, Shaylee. Practical applications that help us towards inclusive prosperity. How about over here? Yeah. +1. Anybody else? Ram. What do you want to hear? Just want to hear me. Okay. All right. Well, in song then. Okay. Yes. Okay. Portfolio company that does gig work, and what are the options for them? All right. One more. Oh, great. I'm loving this. Popcorn. Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so maybe we'll do, let's say, 30 minutes of combo, and then we'll do some Oprah-like mic night. Great. Yeah. Okay. All right. Great. So I'm going to come back to that after an intro. I would love to talk about that. Root cause. Where does it start? All right. I'm Lexi. I have 20 years of operating experience, Amex, Google, and Gusto, where we are 6 years as COO. Left about a year ago, and for the last year have been studying the labor markets as a path to inclusive prosperity. I'm an advisor at General Catalyst, which is an incredible investment firm where the old CEO of Amex, who's now the chairman of GC, and I and the firm have been working on a thesis that basically boils down to, if we want to get to inclusive prosperity, we have to invest in human potential, upgrade job quality, and create more inclusive and effective pathways to and through high quality jobs for more representative people. The first investment we made under this thesis is Shaylee's company, K through 12, hashtag we're hiring. And I'm so excited to jam with like-minded folks on really challenging problem. Over to you, Matt.
Awesome. Hey, I'm Matt. So happy to be here. I'm a huge fan of Gusto, so it's amazing to be in the office. Thanks for everything that you've built, and to everyone else here. I'm the CEO of a company called Pave. We're a compensation company, so we help companies figure out the right market rate, what the fair wage rates are, how to compensate fairly, how to look for DEI imbalances, etc. So one of the questions was, where does it all begin? Where are a lot of the root causes of imbalances in the workplace? And from my perspective, compensation is one of those things, especially because what you sign in an offer letter for that initial compensation rate sort of sticks with you for a long period of time, especially in tech, where equity compensation is such a big component of your total reward package. If you get the equity grants wrong and there's inequities at the offer letter, man, it just really diverges over time, and it's really unfair. I'd imagine you probably saw a lot of this nuance when you were COO of Gusto. So yeah, we have a database with about 4,500 customers, kind of a real-time compensation database. And we also have tools that help companies figure out how to run through all these workflows, how to run through a merit cycle, how to flag inequities, how to keep things fair across departments. And there's a lot of nuance because it's not just a science problem, it's also an art problem where there's a lot of human judgment that comes into play. But I'm having the time of my life. The reason I think compensation is so interesting, aside from, how broken the world is of compensation, I also think it's one of the most universal parts of life. There's about 4 billion members of the active workforce globally, and pretty much every single one of them has to deal with some compensation challenge or understanding if they're getting paid fairly or if they're hiring somebody, what the going market rate is. Meanwhile, it's the largest marketplace in the world without the notion of a real-time price. You can look up the S&P 500. It's up like 4% today. So great day for the markets, but we have no idea what's going on in the labor economy. We have inflation in one regard and we have a recession in the other regard. What does that mean for the labor economy? Are wage rates going up or down? And then lastly, it's the most expensive part of life on earth. About 50% of global GDP goes to wage rates. So it's literally the most expensive thing in the world, and it's just a complete black box. So yeah, I mean, I'm excited to hear the different angles from education, of course. I also think just compensation is one of the really fundamentally broken parts of life on earth. And it's good that we're talking about it. So happy to be here and looking forward to a fruitful discussion.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Lexi. Okay, so I'm going to try to weave everything together here because we got a lot of questions. So let's start by, we talked about the mindset here. Let's talk about the methods since folks are really interested in the specifics. And I'm going to ask each of you now about how you went about creating your technology, Shaylee, yours, and the stuff that you've built over the course of your career. And I asked that question because I wouldn't call myself a technologist, though, Joshua, we build technology all the time with workers. And what I've learned is that it is in the method and actually in the process where the people who mean the most get cut out or left out or excluded. And so I'm curious about the methods here and how those have taken form to make sure or to help ensure that the world, or at least your world and what you're working on, is more inclusive. Shaylee, can I start with you? Perfect.
So the way I would like to answer that question is let's first understand who is in our world. Okay, in our world at Elevate, we have two groups. We have the students. Majority, about more than 99% of our students are in low-income rural communities. In the other side of our world are the teachers. And the way we think about how are we bringing prosperity and what are we doing to both of these groups, let's look at what the problem is. When we look at the students, and when I first started this company and I came from India and I started looking into and really started understanding the US K-12 system, firstly, it was very evident to me that the low-income communities inherently had a problem of access to quality talent. Right? When I looked at the south side of Chicago, when I looked at Detroit, there were schools and classrooms running without a teacher and students sitting in the classroom on a software being click happy. It was completely unacceptable that was going on. So when we looked at solving for that problem to make sure that the resources that were given to those students were on track, what were those two problems? Problem number one was that the kids were not getting access to great teachers. Problem number two was that the skills that were being taught to the children, when we think about the core subjects that are being taught, nothing is actually aligned to what the jobs of the future are going to be. So the first task that we had was, how can we bring high quality teachers to these under-resourced communities so that right from day one, the foundation of the students and communities is rock solid. That's what we did. We found teachers. Let's say the school district is in a rural part of Texas. The teacher could be in San Francisco, now has a setup at home, is a certified teacher, and streams straight into the classroom. And then my second crusade, which I have not yet started on that path, is first is how we are teaching it, which we've solved for. My second is going to be what we are teaching. If we read the reports last week, the math and reading scores have dropped by 5 and 8 points. And this is the lowest drop since 2005. Peggy Kars, who's the commissioner of CES, very clearly said that this lag is because of the lack of teachers. So that's how we are bringing that inclusiveness to make sure that the kids are getting the best. On the other side are our teachers. There are 3.2 million teachers in America this year alone. Adrian, I'm going to ask you a question. How many teachers do you think have left the profession? Lexi, you know the answer, so don't answer that. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Like 100,000, like 50,000, like left the profession.
250,000.
Okay, 800,000.
Oh my God.
800,000 out of the 3.2 million teachers have left the profession. And in 2 years, 1.6 million teachers are expected to leave the profession. So our job is also to make the profession great for the teachers to meet their needs. So that's how we are bringing that inclusion into the classrooms by serving both sides of our demand and supply. And at the end, having an output that's an amazing experience and creating foundation for the kids we serve.
Thank you, Shaylee. Thank you for putting me on the spot too, keeping me on my
Most
toes. Go ahead,
welcome.
Lexi.
So we're facing a human crisis in the U.S. and arguably all developed countries of epic proportions. That's akin to the climate crisis that no one is talking about. Since the 70s, the U.S. productivity has gone like this. Wages have gone like this. They've been divergent. And we celebrate that everybody has been earning more. When you break out by quintiles, wage adjusted for inflation, there's 2/5 of Americans that are earning more. Most people are flat, and 32% of people who are working today are working poor, one paycheck away from economic despair, real trade-offs, grandma's dialysis or our house payment. And that number is rising. So let's look further, let's scratch and sniff further about this. In our own country, 32% of people are working poor, but we're celebrating that it's a low unemployment rate. So if I forecast out to 2030, how is this going to look? Well, the population that's working today, 20 to 64, went negative for the first time last year. We also have about 5 million people who are out of the workforce. 260,000 died in COVID. 3.2 million immigrants are no longer participating in the workforce because they're blocked from coming into the country. And then there's some really interesting dynamics happening with men 25 to 60 who are not getting back into the workforce post-COVID. And we suspect it's because of a paper ceiling that now more people are requiring a 4-year degree. And they're also screening out for a criminal record, one conviction, which is about 45% of men in that wage bracket. So as we have though more demand, employers have not stopped needing workers. So we get this disparity between workers needed and workers supplied, which further drives up how do employers handle this. They use old playbooks, they offshore, automate as much as they can, which are usually the rote jobs that are repeatable. And then you look at the skilling factories, K through 12 and post-secondary skilling factories, to be using a procurement language that's a little harsh. But what Shaylee said is exactly right. The predeterminants for employability are not being taught by these factories. So if all the jobs that we're skilling people for are moving out of this country, but our school system doesn't change and our post-secondary system doesn't change, and then, oh, by the way, our algorithms that were invented to make hiring effective and efficient are actually screening out 50% of the working population, you are going to have an increase, cost of capital, inflation, societal and civic unrest, because you already have 70% of people who feel the economy and the government is rigged against them. And that's getting worse, not better, if we don't give people good family sustaining jobs. So I think it's not necessarily the root cause to your question. There's a lot of theories on what it is, but it's certainly one of the major drivers. We can talk about the hope later.
Okay, Matt, you're up, my friend.
Sounds good. It's really interesting to hear you talk about wage rates from your perspective, because I see it every day in such like a granular sense. So yeah, I'm definitely excited to learn more. But yeah, my story, I've always been a personal finance nerd. I used to be an engineer. I was always the one arguing about, the mega Roth backdoor conversion tricks, all those tricks of life. I think it's crazy, by the way, that you're never taught this. It's just secondhand knowledge that you get from your friend at the lunch table or your brother-in-law or whatever. So I think the system is kind of rigged in that regard. But I was always kind of a nerd in that regard. I tried making a better version of Mint. It was supposed to be the supercharged personal finance app in your pocket. Went to market in like fall of 2019. Tried to sell it to companies as a new benefit. And it was a strikeout. No company wanted to buy it. So that was pretty unfortunate. But there were a few companies that basically said, Matt, we're really confused about our stock options, right? We're trying to compete with engineers that are applying for jobs at Facebook and Netflix and our company, Gusto, whatever, a maybe slightly smaller company than a Facebook. And they're trying to sell like what this stock option is in a way that's both honest and genuine and transparent, but also optimistic. And they were all struggling. So I said, yeah, that's pretty interesting. I live in San Francisco, so my friends come to me with job offers all the time. And they're like, well, this one has 10,000 shares and this one has 5,000. Clearly the first one's better, right? No, not quite so fast, right? So I said, yeah, this seems interesting. And then it was kind of just like this thread. And the more I pulled on the thread, the more I realized, wow, compensation is just like so crazy. Like, have you ever thought about why you're paid what you're paid? It's just kind of a number that's put on a paper. I used to be an engineer at Facebook, and I would ask my manager, like, why is this my rate? Like, why am I paid this? And he would have no clue. It was just like an algorithm. So I was like, yeah, it's kind of really interesting how the most expensive thing on earth is just like a finger in the air exercise. And, from an inclusive prosperity standpoint, what that means is that people that are more willing to negotiate, people that come from a more fortunate background where they have this brother-in-law that tells them about that mega Roth backdoor 401k conversion or whatever it is, they just are playing this like secret handbook that they have access to that nobody else has access to. And so, yeah, I was definitely pretty intrigued. I then realized that, okay, this problem space started with just confusion around stock options at the offer letter, right? Yeah, a pretty small, finite pain point. But, a company also has to figure out how to communicate to employees. And then they need to figure out how to allocate their budget across all the different departments. And then they need to figure out, well, what's actually the fair market rate? And there's a lot of surveys. If you go online and do a Google search for, I don't know, how much does like a chemical engineer get paid, you'll probably find some blog post or something. But there's not really any notion of like, this is actually what the market is doing. So this was like kind of the end of 2019. And then 2020 rolls around. A few customers are willing to pay for this initial product. And then the world flips upside down. COVID starts. And from a labor market standpoint, I think there was this radical shift because, for the most part, it used to be that if you want a job at Gusto in San Francisco in this office, you have to be located here in San Francisco. But we sort of went from this one-to-one model to a one-to-N model, where suddenly if I'm an employee in Chicago or in San Francisco or Bolivia or wherever, I can apply for a job anywhere around the world. And that's not to say that some employers still don't hire in the city that they're located, but suddenly you have so much power as an employee or as a job seeker that didn't exist before. There's still a lot of confusion, but suddenly we went from this one-to-one model to this one-to-N model. And so I think the whole world of compensation just kind of flipped upside down, and conventional wisdom sort of went out the door in terms of geo rates and, all of this conventional philosophy. So yeah, that's how I sort of got into the space. I just think it's completely like upside down and broken. That as a job seeker, you have literally no clue what your market rate is, what you should be asking for in the offer letter negotiation. When a recruiter asks what your salary expectations are, it's this weird taboo question that nobody knows how to answer. We're starting to see a lot of legislation being passed around, job descriptions being required to have salary bands in them in New York and California, which is great, but it's just a first step. So there's still just so much confusion in this space. And if you don't get it right, huge inequities evolve over time. You were saying the 2/5 paradigm of those, the relative purchasing power. What was it? 2/5 has increased, but the other 3/5 has decreased. Yeah. I think that's like totally broken.
Thanks. And it actually, the black box, or not, like the lack of transparency, I can speak for the social sector. My God, it just creates a level of inequity inside an organization that can become really resentful and unhealthy. I joked in the prep that Matt's going to have a new client called the Workers Lab coming out of this panel because we need help too. We're a fairly young organization. I think it's a really compelling idea, Matt. Thank you for sharing. Okay, root cause. Someone over here talked about root causes. I have the same question. I was also saying in the prep that like really over the last year, I've got asked to speak on this topic of like worker voice in technology, worker voice everywhere, right? And when we started to get asked, right, Joshua, I was like, my God, why am I getting asked to speak on a topic that's so like inherent and obvious to me at some place like the Workers Lab, right? Like for us, it's just inherent. It's like, of course, we're going to involve workers from the beginning, in the middle, and then again at the end. We have not figured out the ownership piece, by the way. We're getting there. But like, it's pretty obvious to me. So the question I think about the root cause is like, and I'm going to ask all three of you, why is this a problem? Why is it so elusive of a thing? And Like, how come it just isn't the norm when we know it works, at least in 3 instances here? Lexi, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I think that investors have a lot to do with this, and the institutional markets in particular. So when we look at how companies are run, usually employees are treated as an expense, and that expense is to be managed down. And so you look for efficiencies that get you less employees and more revenue, and hence more profits. I think this is a really JV way of looking at it. In fact, especially in a supply constrained environment, employees and talent are your scarcest resource. That's going to be your supply constraint. So, how you want to build businesses and how institutional investors and private investors should be rewarding businesses is by saying, are you building a human centered enterprise where you have these intentional pathways for representative people that have experiences on the job that fulfill their needs? And can you tell me the math, like you can for customer acquisition and customer loyalty, which is both funneled with yield rates at every stage, so that if I'm a COO of Gusto, I know where do I invest my next dollar to get more customers, or to keep my customers, or to have them buy more from me. If you believe, which I think most people do, the intuition that when you have happy, engaged, capable, and skilled employees, those employees drive happy, engaged, high spending, long staying customers. And when you get that equation right, you get higher sales, lower costs, better margins. Right? How many people, anybody disagree with that? Happy, engaged customers beget from happy, engaged employees, and that's a better P&L. Okay? But no one that I've talked to almost every CEO of Fortune 100 companies, CHRO, has the math on unit economics that help them make the decision on where to invest my next dollar. So lots of things could be done on this. Number one is, just like there's a zero carbon now movement in institutional investors where they price the risk of throwing off carbon, we can use your human capital expenses as an R&D expense to incentivize real investment in people and start to lay bare what are the ways that you're investing in talent, both your existing talent and your future talent, knowing that our country can only survive if we have good family sustaining jobs for more people. So I think that that's, again, I always preface of, it's not one silver bullet, it's a lot of lead bullets, but a reimagined capitalism with a balanced scorecard that accounts for planet, people, and profits is a huge lever.
Thanks, Lexi. Shaylee? I'm going to come to you with the same question, and qualify it a little bit further by saying that, like, centering, I guess, humans in your work, I have to assume in a rural region has been uniquely difficult, intersectionally, financially, etc. So I'm hoping you can shed some light on what that process was like and is like.
So just to rephrase your question, like working in rural communities, what is the process to do what?
I'm asking you, what was most challenging to you in that process?
Yeah, I think firstly, the most challenging part was to get into these communities and really understanding who these communities were. When I started the company, I lived in the house of a low income family for a month because I didn't want to live in my high rise in Chicago and understand what the needs and the wants of a low income community were. When I wanted to understand how to build a platform for the teachers, I spent a lot of time. I didn't live with the teacher. I wish I could, but spent a lot of time with the teachers. So I think coming to these communities, firstly, what was shocking to me was that nobody was thinking of serving them. Every single K-12 company that I was looking at that point of time, they would go to the large urban school districts where they had high number of students. The most important thing was, how do you get more revenue out of these districts? So the large school districts that had 200,000, 300,000 students was the first option. I didn't start this company to really look at what would be my my revenue after 10 years. That has become, of course, a focus, but I started this company to serve the communities that I was looking at. So the first challenge was to really look at and say they have no resources. Like I would drive in Michigan to Ohio and I would be driving for 80 miles without a single gas station. And then I would reach this school district that had 200 students there and with only two teachers and with nobody teaching the other classes. So the first shocking thing to me was the extreme lack of resources. I can literally say, maybe in your audience, I'm the one person that's probably been to every single community and rural community in America, because the only way to, yeah.
Shelly crushes it in all states that you probably have not been to. In addition to the ones you have, but like she crushes in Kentucky, I'm telling you.
Thank you. It was really it's so funny story. I was once at a conference with the superintendents, and I wasn't born and raised here, so I didn't know a lot about America. But I think coming as an outsider was very evident to me on where the problems lie. And I met this superintendent. He said he was from Maine, and I was like, "Where is that?" He was like, "Okay, go far east, and it's right at the corner." But jokes apart, the first thing I learned was there was no access. The second thing I learned was they had given up to access. And that is the problem I wanted to solve. Like they weren't even fighting for, oh, let's go find a teacher. In a rural county, Georgia, where I serve, it's called Lee County. So a lot of information there right away. Their Algebra 1 teacher was their local priest. So the challenges that I faced was mindset. The mindset that, yes, it is possible for us to get the access that we deserve and it is our right. So fighting for that and causing that systematic change in a very antiquated mindset, truthfully, that was my biggest challenge, that the communities that lacked resources lost the belief that they deserve resources.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to show them that they deserve it. And not only that they deserve it, that they can get it and they can enjoy and it can add value to them.
Lexi?
Can we actually go to the audience? Do you mind for questions? Could we popcorn some?
Could we hear from Matt?
Yeah,
Before?
Yeah. Really fast.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to information, and I'll answer this in a compensation light from two perspectives. From the employer perspective, in a world where you don't have information you trust in terms of what the market data is, you tend to do finger in the air arithmetic, and that's where inequities can evolve. So it's all about information there. From the employee perspective, not the employer, most job seekers do not know what questions to ask. They do not know what the fair market data is. They do not know what their value is in the market. And as a result, they sort of just fall into whatever the employer says. So I really think it comes down to information. A world where information is more freely accessible, specifically in my lens from the compensation standpoint, is a better world that's more efficient and more equitable.
Thanks, Matt. We're at Q&A. All right, we've got 10 minutes or so for Q&A from the audience.
Perfect.
For any one of us, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, so
Okay.
I'll offer some questions, but a brief reminder that slido.com is your way to ask questions. So go to slido.com and enter RIFS22, Responsible Innovation Founder Summit 22. So please keep the questions coming, and we can so please enter them there. So much big picture questions, and you guys have been thoughtful on this already. So much of the tech industry concentrates wealth, privileges winners. It's what are big structural ways that we can't, give us the big picture lens on how to focus on solving problems for the rest of us.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that we need a good jobs movement in this country, and we need investors to get behind the principles of responsible innovation. There's no such thing as a rich, unlivable world. So I don't know where people think this is going. If we're not investing with urgency in solutions for the climate, for inclusive prosperity, for more effective healthcare, if we continue to invest only in software eats the world business and say, I want venture-like returns, it's got to get to 100 million in 3 years, and please give me 90% margins. It's like we have, over the last 20 years, historians will look at this decade and say, everything has become more convenient. I can get food really quickly. I can get my, toenail polish delivered. I can even get someone to come to my house and blow dry my hair. But most people who are living in America outside the coasts are struggling to get by. A woman who is got a disabled child is cutting back on goldfish because they're too expensive, and she's taking showers at the Y. Walmart's share of milk has gone down because people can't afford milk. But you know what shares are up? LVMH, because people are buying handbags, going on vacation. We have got to say we are all in this together, because if we don't have a livable planet and more prosperous folks that are sharing in the wealth, then it doesn't get better. And I'd like to say that I think we can generate, Google-like or Facebook-like returns by investing in these things. I don't think we can, and I don't think we should, because I don't think that's where we have gotten any better as a planet once we took our eye off the ball of solving real problems. Accessing information and making it universally accessible, great cause. Then trying to say we've got to have growth on growth on growth, it leads you to make bad decisions.
Yeah, I can take a stab. I think we have a lot of founders in the room here or over Zoom. So what I usually think about, it's usually as it pertains to compensation, but I suppose for any decision you make, you should act as if that decision or whatever you do will be on the New York Times a year from now, or 5 years, or 10 years from now. So if you're deciding some special compensation setup, or your star engineer comes to you asking for a raise, make that decision as if every employee will have perfect information and knowledge of this, and it will be plastered on the front of the New York Times. And you could say, hey, you know what? That's fine. I'll go to the World, or I'll go to the All Hands, and I'll explain, this is why I made this decision at this point in time with the information I had, and I stand by this decision, and it was fair. So that's just like one framework that I often use. A really practical example would be what I just said, where your star engineer comes to you, asks for a raise, says, hey, look, I have another job offer that's going to offer me $100,000 more. Can you match this? Your instinct as a founder, especially an early stage founder, might be to say, yeah, of course. Like, I can't lose my star engineer. But you know what's going to happen? It's going to create this political environment where, because that person got preferential treatment, word will spread eventually, inevitably. It always spreads, especially with compensation. Word will spread. And then suddenly it's a leaky faucet. And then people that negotiate more or come to you with ad hoc requests, suddenly they're the ones that get preferential treatment. That's how inequities can evolve over time, and how you create a really political environment. So yeah, one framework is just like, assume that everything you do will be in the New York Times. And how would you feel about that?
Shaylee?
Yeah. So the way I actually completely agree with Lexi. The way I think about it is, you get an outcome where you put the right input. Without putting the right input in the right structure and framework, you're not going to get the outcome that you want. I remember when I started the company and I was trying to fundraise, nobody understood the problem that I was trying to solve. It was amazing, working with Lexi and the General Catalyst team, that to find someone who understands the value of what we're trying to add. Like Lexi said, what you measure. All of our questions were, are you freemium? What is your monetization model? All of that is critical. But I think if the investments and capital go into the right companies and the right organizations and the right things that are causing that systematic change in the world, and they have to be measured and they have to have the KPIs to grow, you will see that systematic change. But first, the mindset has to come for us to believe that we are investing in the right things that are going to cause inclusive prosperity and are going to bring a societal and an ecosystem change in the world. And it's really interesting to see forums like these where we're starting to talk about it.
Could I contribute to a question as well? Is that okay? Okay. Because I think one of the things the question is how you change the big structural stuff. Workers need more power, period, right? And call that a labor union, call that a worker center, call it whatever you want. Workers need more tools and more infrastructure to be able to organize for what they want and need in their lives, to take care of themselves and their families. And let me bring it back to the technology piece. Technology can be helpful. If you go to any labor union or any worker center in the country right now, the chances are they're still using Post-its and whatever, right? We are right now about to acquire a thing called Workit, which is bringing AI to labor organizing for the first time in this country. And it's sorely needed. It's badly needed. If the enterprise is to restructure things, people need to be at the center again. And tech leaders need to make choices to fund that kind of tech development, to fund the organizing, and to put the values where their mouth is, frankly.
Perfect segue to Bhakti Mirchandani's question. To what degree is the diversity rider relevant to your capital raises? And if it is relevant, how does it affect your boards and practices? So to my founders.
Sorry.
To what degree does the diversity rider relevant to capital raises? The diversity rider. I think she's talking about how are you writing into your term sheets information? A rider, diversity rider. Yes. So to my entrepreneurs, you know, how do you think about that? How do you talk to investors about it specifically?
I think that is, sorry. No, I don't have an answer, ma'am. But
I don't.
I mean, all that I was saying was that I think this is more for the investors and how investors think about investing in diversity or diverse founders. Is that the question?
I think clearly, I think we don't. Thank you for the question. Let's try a different one.
Let me just address it quickly. So as a public company, NASDAQ came out with a ruling that says you have to disclose the diversity of your board and your company, and they created a really, if you want a little Mensa test, follow the tab. If this, then that. You know, it's challenging, but it's great because it's a forcing function for people to say. I don't love the term you're diversifying. What you are doing is correcting an anomaly that allowed you to have 80% cisgender white males leading your company when in the US we have 30% white males declining and more Black and brown people. So we're just correcting a historical anomaly that makes your company worse if you don't have more people representing the customers that are buying your product. So I like that NASDAQ put that in the private sector. I think Responsible Innovation Labs is encouraging similar disclosures in private sector companies. That doesn't exist, but as a firm, we have a commitment to investing in great businesses that are owned by representative founders per the example that I just gave, because it's the right thing to do, but it's the right thing to do for business as well as wherever you come from to the issue from a philosophical standpoint.
And two quick things I would add on to that. In Europe, I believe they're a little bit ahead of the United States. Private companies also have their requirement in certain countries. I don't know the exact specifics. And the second thing is California is in the process of passing some legislation that will also require that for private companies, some new degree of reporting around diversity metrics for private companies too. So it's encouraging.
Okay, and our last question from Matt. COVID gave us a generational inflection point to reinvent the future of work and a more inclusive economy. I love that hopefulness. Where should we focus our efforts right now to make a difference?
Is a question for Matt? Did you say?
Wait, from or for?
It was from a Matt, for a Matt. Yeah, thank you.
I think the general advice I've been given is that when there's a massive wave, jump to the front of the wave and ride that wave. So the wave I saw was this disruption from the one-to-one to the one-to-N that I was describing earlier, remote work being a more specific term for that. And that causes so much flux and chaos in the labor economy, how people think about jobs, how people think about education. So when you see a wave, jump to the front of it. The one that I saw was just that radical shift from one-to-one to one-to-N. But I think there's a lot of other waves happening right now. I'd be curious for Lexi, for your perspective on some of the biggest waves, but that's generally my thought. You can have the most impact with your time when you're doing it in a period of massive flux for the world in some dimension.
Yeah, I think every company can participate in a more inclusively prosperous future by building around this human enterprise concept. So think hard about who you're drawing from and how you're designing experiences that keep people engaged and keep people getting skills for the jobs you have today, but also the jobs of the future. And don't just kind of believe that it will happen. Ask for the same economics that you have in your customer funnels. Go back to your companies and find a way to look by customer. What are your employee segments? And what is the cost of acquisition of cohorts in those segments? What's the lifetime value of those employees, which means translating people's contributions to a dollar value, easier for CX and sales, harder for engineering and product, but it can be done. What's the retention rate, not on average, but again, by segment and by cohort, and put that into a logo, which is a percent of people leaving, but also a dollar value that's leaving, and start to toggle LTV to CAC, but it's person lifetime value to person CAC, it's person retention rate. So if you do that as leaders who are looking at, for example, so many companies doing layoffs, and there's no disrespect. Sometimes you have to do that, but sometimes it's a really short-sighted decision for a venture-backed company that isn't responsible for quarterly earnings. Because if you took a sledgehammer to your workforce and you fired a bunch of people because the short-term expenses went down and your burn rate went up, but you think of this, you basically fired your customers that were 5-to-1 LTV to CAC because they'd been there for a couple of years, they'd been trained up, they're really well suited for the jobs that they have. When the economy comes back, and it will come back, and you have to hire again, you have a really rough brand halo to overcome. Why are you a stable company now? And then secondly, you've got to do an expensive acquisition haul and onboarding to get people to 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 5-to-1. So I think just do the same economics that you do for your unit economics on customers, on your people, and have a rich discussion as a management team of what does that tell us? Should we be actually firing a bunch of people, or should we be investing like spring training in their abilities to be able to do more for our customers so that our customers love this company? And I think you might have some really interesting insights.
Shaylee?
Yes, I'm just going to rephrase the question because I want to make sure that I'm answering. So the question was, how did COVID cause a change in the world that we see in terms of how we operate and how we work? So one of the things that I noticed, and I'm going to go back to education, is what I'm most passionate about and what I can talk about. The teacher shortage before COVID was about 200,000. The teacher shortage during COVID was a different case. We were all just reacting and everybody did what they could. But COVID taught everyone that, hey, we can work from home. We can have the flexibility of location. We can have the flexibility of time. Gig economy has taught us all of that. But when an industry and a category doesn't evolve with the changing times of the people who are a part of that category or industry, it completely shakes up the ecosystem. And nobody thought COVID would happen, but K-12 on its own had not changed for a really long time. We started working on this in 2016 because we saw the tsunami coming. Now, the tsunami became a Hurricane Nicole or Ian or whatever you call it because of COVID, where teachers started saying, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do what others are doing, that is work from home. So I think there will be several points like these, acts of God or any other. What we can do as entrepreneurs in our capacity is try to push boundaries always, to continue to foresee and forecast what the problems of the future are going to be and continue to build for that, so that COVID or no COVID, ultimately we're making the society a better place and bringing prosperity to everyone. So not being short-sighted, but really be long-sighted and being bold about the changes that you want to make, because you see something that others don't yet see.
Thank you so much. A great place to end. So next, folks, lunch. I know you can smell it. First of all, thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Lexi. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shaylee.
Thanks, Shaylee.
That was an incredible discussion.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
And now we encourage you to draw on this community that we're talking about. Please get to know each other. Please go get some lunch. Bring your lunch back here. And we have until 12:15 when we'll reconvene for our next panel. One housekeeping note: if you are parked in a parking lot behind Gusto, that's not a great place to park, and please move your car. Thank you so much. Please enjoy lunch, get to know each other, and we'll see you at 12:15.